This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just hit the link in the show description to support now.
Explaining football to the friend who's just there for the nachos? Hard. Tailgating from home like a pro with snacks and drinks everyone will love? An easy win. And with Instacart helping deliver the snack time MVPs to your door, you're ready for the game in as fast as 30 minutes. So you never miss a play or lose your seat on the couch or have to go head-to-head for the last chicken wing. Shop game day faves on Instacart and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 grocery orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Other fees and terms apply.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes per detail.
Need a holiday gift that will keep her sparkling all year long? Blue Nile, the original online jeweler, has experts on hand 24/7 who can help you find the perfect piece. Beyond that, Blue Nile makes the gifting experience easier than ever with guaranteed free shipping and returns, as well as a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Right now, get 30% off jewelry at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com for 30% off. BlueNile.com.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale, I'm a writer and film critic, and today I'm delighted to be talking to Jez Conolly, the author of a book on John Carpenter's 1982 seminal science fiction horror The Thing. He's written the book for the Devil's Advocate series and it is available where you get good books. He's also written an essay on his sort of childhood experience of watching the film for the Scarred for Life series of books. This is in volume 3, you will find it, and that will be available soon. If you can hear a creature crying in the background, that's my cat, and at least I think it's my cat, because we can never be sure of the identity of things, animals, or people when it comes to The Thing. If you enjoy the episode, please remember to share it as widely as you like. Threads, Twitter, Facebook, all of the social media outlets if possible. You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel, or you can email me directly. If you have any suggestions or feedback, I'm always happy to hear it. But before you do any of that, please enjoy the episode.
So I was legally not old enough to see it when I first saw it, as many young people weren't in the early 80s. So I mean, I wasn't one of the 5.5 people who saw it in the cinema in Britain when it came out in 82. You know, you win a prize if you're one of those folks. So I caught it. In fact, the very first scenes from the film that I saw were on a BBC News report at some point in 1983, it would have been, which was designed to highlight the moral panic around the video nasty thing. I think because the makers of this little film report on the BBC News were a bit lazy, they decided to go to their local video rental store and hire a copy of the thing, because you could legally get it then. It wasn't on the banned list, perfectly accessible film. And then they filmed 2 adolescents, well, young boys really, sitting in front of the TV, feeding this tape into their Ferguson Video Star top loader, massive piece of kit under their telly, and then you saw on the screen the opening titles of The Thing here, with these 2 young gentlemen sitting in front of it, to highlight the fact that young kids were being scrambled by these terrible films. And as a result of me seeing that film, I went across the road to my own video rental store and rented the film out. So thanks BBC News for putting me onto that film. So I was 17, I think, probably when I first saw the film, and it was battered video rental, pan and scan, you name it. It was a poor copy, but hey, I got to see it. So that was really nice.
What was your first reaction?
Can I swear? No, I better not.
Yeah, I mean, you can. It's up to you.
Okay, well, I probably shat myself, not literally, but it was a really profound experience. At an age when, I don't know if you felt it at all, but by the age of about 16, 17, the sorts of things that scared you when you were a kid didn't really anymore. So things like the dark at the top of the stairs, that sort of childhood trauma, nightmare stuff. I'd kind of grown out of that. And then I saw the thing, and there was something in not so much the extremity of what was appearing on screen, but the thing that struck me was there was a quality to the soundtrack that just really got under my skin, so to speak. I just took that the bass drone that you kept hearing at certain times in the film, and the noises, the kind of melange of noises and sounds that preceded an appearance of the thing, just used to terrify me for some reason. And so that was in probably the summer of 1983 I first saw it, and as a result of seeing it that once, I must have rented it about 4 or 5 times in quite quick succession, because I just couldn't get enough of it. And so very quickly it became one of my favourite movies.
I mean, that soundtrack you talk about, it's got that wonderful score, which is credited solely to Ennio Morricone, and you make the point in your book that it's like 20 minutes of screen time.
About that, yeah.
Which is still quite a significant chunk for any soundtrack. But I watched it last night in preparation to talk to you, Jez, and one of the things I noticed is the sort of the use of the wind on the soundtrack as well. It sort of has that. You know, nowadays on YouTube, you can get those sort of 12-hour long sort of on a wintry night sort of comfort things. Yeah. There's an element of that goes against the horror, but you're always hearing that wind and the sense that you're isolated, and you know has a great effect.
There is actually at least one, if not more than one, ASMR thing video on YouTube, so you can sit back and listen and relax to 8 hours of Outpost 31 wind sound effects, if you so choose. You know, if that turns you on.
Well, I know what I'm doing with the rest of the day.
There you go. That's Monday sorted, isn't it?
And you mentioned the soundtrack in your book, and I think you have this great line for the bass that runs through it, that dump, dump, dump. And it's you talk about it being sort of like the shuffling gait of the thing itself.
Yeah, I mean, some people have compared it to, have thought of it as a heartbeat of the thing. For me, it's more of a stride pattern. And actually, I think it lends a beat to the edit of the film to an extent. It takes its time, and I think that's quite important in terms of appreciating the rate at which you experience the film. You know, that's that sort of speed that you at which you take it in. So I think it's that beat, be it a heartbeat or a stride pattern, is critical to the appreciation of the film.
And the film starts with these wonderful snowscapes as well. For some reason, I just think cinema is so conducive to that sort of landscape. You know, I think of The Shining, I think of Where Eagles Dare, the title sequence of the flying over the Alps. It's an instantly cinematic landscape.
It is. I mean, in the book, one of the films that I refer to, because I was really interested in the environment of the film and that the extreme whiteness, and then of the exterior, and then you have the great darkness of the interior of the base, and that very, very marked contrast. And I was thinking about, I'm guessing you've seen Dr. Zhivago, the bit where they go to the Winter Palace and they're riding through the snow, and then they go inside, and the interior of that is quite amazing as well. But there's something happens to the human eye, without getting too scientific, about the way that the eye works when it's. And another example would have been the Gold Rush Chaplin, where he goes into Mad Larson's cabin from having been outside in the snow, and something happens to the eye when it goes from extreme light to darkness. You often get these kind of ghost images. You probably, if you think back, you probably experienced it in various settings.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. So there's almost a lingering image that can happen when that happens in a movie. And I always got that with the thing when you're going from those snow scenes in the first instance to the interior settings of the base. There's a physical reaction almost that happens. And a lot of that is in the cutting. It goes straight into black, which fascinates me.
Tell me a little bit about the origin of the book, how you came about writing it, because it's a series, correct?
Yeah, a bit of a long story. So prior to writing this book, I co-edited with my wife 3 books in a different book series, World Film Locations, for a different publisher. This is a series of books. I think around about 50 books.
Is this like Index Publishing or
Intellect, which is based
Intellect, yes,
in Bristol, and they did a number of these. And each book took a city and then chronologically walked through the many films that were either shot in or set in that city. And we did 3 books. We did Dublin and Reykjavik and Liverpool. And I went to the editor, the top editor for the series, through an event at BFI South Bank, and I went along to that. And I got chatting to another editor in that series, done another book, New York, I think it was, a guy called Neil Mitchell, who's done quite a lot of film writing over the years. And he was telling me that he just got the gig to write a book for this Devil's Advocate series on Brian De Palma's Carrie. And I remember him saying to me, well, if you got a shot at one of these, what film would you write about? And immediately I said, well, it would have to be The Thing. It's the film that if I think about it, I could probably come up with 40,000 words without too much trouble. He says, and so consequently, off the back of that, I got in touch with the publisher, a guy called John Atkinson. Interestingly, one of the first books to come out in the Devil's Advocate series was written by Anne Bilson. She did a book on Let the Right One In.
Oh, who wrote the BFI classics?
Exactly right. So that's really important in terms of the development of the Thing's reputation. Her BFI classics book came out in 1997, which I think is really important in the life cycle of the film. That book came out when it did, and so that was about 13 years after the film came out, and my book came out about 13 years after Anne's book came out. So it felt like the right time for another look at it. And one of the things that I wanted to avoid doing was to replicate what Anne did, which was itself a kind of chronological walk through the film's plot. So mine is more of a kind of a thematic dip in. If you go through the chapters, I touch on various different ideas and concepts rather than just sticking to the narrative. The books, as you're probably aware, do look very much like the BFI Classics books. John Atkinson used to work for BFI. I think that's where he got his original idea from. And so they're quite nice companion pieces to the BFI Classics books. I recommend them a lot. I've written another one in the series as well, actually. So I recommend them highly. But they're specifically about horror.
What was the book that you wrote, the other book?
So the other one was Dead of Night, the Ealing Classics, Ealing film, horror.
Portmanteau film?
Yes, that's right, yeah, 1945. That was actually, I co-wrote that one with another guy, David Bates. And actually, John Atkinson brought out another series following Devil's Advocates, which was the Constellations series, which was intended to be the science fiction counterpart to the horror of Devil's Advocates. And I co-wrote a book in that series with Emma Westwood on John Frankenheimer's Seconds. Emma's gone on to edit a really excellent book on Bride of Frankenstein, to which I come to the chapter. So yeah, they were really nice books to do. And the great thing about them was that it was kind of carte blanche. John was very receptive to ideas. He wasn't going around commissioning people to write books on particular films. He took pitches and responded, and we got books written. And so it was a really great opportunity to explore something that I really wanted to write about.
Yeah. That's the best thing in the world, is when an editor says, what do you want to write about, rather than here's a list of names and we need to cover these. That's the best thing in the world. And you've also written on The Thing for another publication, correct? That's coming out soon, I believe.
It just came out a few weeks ago. So if you are, like me, a member of Gen X and grew up in the 1970s and 1980s, you are probably familiar with a series of books called Scarred for Life. They have a podcast. They started a podcast about this time last year, and they've now published 3 books in the series. That probably will be it for that series, actually. But this third book that came out just a few weeks ago was covering the 1980s, and particularly films and culture in the 1980s. And so as a result of that, I got to contribute a new chapter, a new essay about the thing for that. So it's quite nice to revisit the film after a period of time. The book came out in 2013, I think it was. So about a decade has passed, and really interesting to. One reason I really wanted to do it was because the publisher of the book asked me to take out a few gags that were in the original manuscript. I thought, I want to use those. And the Scarred for Life books are much more kind of lightweight and upbeat. So it was an opportunity to recycle some old jokes, really.
Yeah, the story of my life. So, that sounds really good, and it sounds like you've had an opportunity to go over the film sort of multiple times, as well as and through multiple time periods as well. You've had a gap between them, so you've had a chance to reconsider. And again, rewatching the film last night, I didn't come to it as a kid. It wasn't one of my video nasties. You mentioned watching Alien prior to it, and I think Alien very much stands in the place of The Thing, and I came to The Thing as an adult. I remember having a friend who was really disparaging of John Carpenter. And you know how sometimes you have a friend when you're 13, 14, and they say something and it sticks with you for ages. And then you, as an adult, you have to kind of go, wait a minute, why do I even think that? And his thing was John Carpenter uses like the apostrophe S before his films, like John Carpenter's, whatever, The Halloween or Escape from New York or Assault on Precinct 13. And he's like, how arrogant is that? How, and I just thought, yeah. And it's taken me ages to actually watch his films and go, no, this is brilliant. Why did I have this stupid sort of prejudice against him?
No, I get that completely. I think Carpenter is a bit of an impresario, old school style. His hero is Howard Hawks, and I think he very early on recognised that, frankly, if you put his name at the beginning of the title of the film, it will sell more tickets. So, what's not to like about that, I suppose. But I can't say that particularly bothered me. But I know what you mean. I do know what you mean. Sometimes it doesn't really work for me. I mean, John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars. Who cares, really? Anyway, but yeah, it does. Well, one thing I would say is that when you see his name appear at the beginning of the film, it rapidly disappears to show you just the word "The Thing" on the screen. So it doesn't.
That was a real childish sort of prejudice rather than any serious criticism, and it kind of irritates me that it blocked me from approaching his cinema earlier on. I've since watched pretty much everything, including Ghosts of Mars, unfortunately. And I'm much more appreciative. I think some of his films are, evidence of the best genre cinema of the period that he was working in at his best. They live, Assault on Precinct 13 and Halloween are probably, along with The Thing, are probably comparable to anything going on at that time.
Yeah, I tried the Fog in as well. I really like the Fog.
Absolutely true.
What I would say is that I think because of the genre that he's mostly stuck to throughout his career, you get a lot of people, lots of just film fans and critics who just won't give him any credit just because of the nature of the genre. And I would actually say that he is one of the best directors of the widescreen format, editing in the widescreen format. But I think actually probably particularly Assault on Precinct 13, if you watch that again from the point of view of the edit and the framing, he's an absolute master of populating the frame with meaningful positions of people and objects. You definitely see that in the thing. There's some really important critical stuff in terms of where a character is when you see them, which side of the screen they're on, for instance. There's weight to that, I think, and I think he was absolutely brilliant at doing that.
Well, he kind of has to do it to sort of get into the story and to move into the film a little bit. He kind of has to do it because for two reasons. One, it's an ensemble film, so he needs to present these characters, and he doesn't have time. He doesn't want to use dialogue to that. So you get a couple of that, like, turn the music down, and that sort of stuff. But really, he's got to do that visually. And the second thing is The second thing is The Thing. In that,
we'll do that a lot today. It's fine.
Is that where people are standing and what they're doing and where they're standing in relation to each other is gonna give you a clue as to who someone might or might not be, or a false clue, so that the paranoia will be ramped up.
Absolutely.
That ensemble, I think, is just so brilliantly cast.
Familiar faces, to a lot of people, but not necessarily familiar names, which I think is a weird strength to the film. You've got this sense of familiarity. If you've watched TV throughout the 70s and early 80s, you would have recognised some of the actors in that, but not necessarily know what their names are. And that's an interesting quality to it, I think. Obviously, you would have recognised Kurt Russell, no doubt, but and so he's the obvious star in the movie. But one thing that I touch on in the book actually is going back to this arrangement of characters on the screen, and also tapping into the paranoia thing, which runs through this film completely, is that you frequently see the characters formed in a sort of a semicircle. That I'll be watching a TV monitor or just stood around talking to each other. And I always get the sense when I watch it, even if I watch it now, actually, it never seems to kind of wear out this, that at any given moment, you're expecting one of the characters to kind of turn and break the fourth wall and look at you, look at me, and say, well, what do you think we should do? So you almost feel like, are you even like a crew member of part of this? You feel like you're part of it. And then you begin to think, and the next layer is, maybe I'm a thing.
Right,
So
yeah.
It's getting a very interesting territory, and that I think comes from this arrangement of characters. You feel it because it's a very widescreen movie. You're looking at from left to right often in this film, and you take it, and you're feeling like you keep coming back almost to yourself in it. It's very strange.
I love the way that not everyone is like properly introduced as well. You know, I was just mentioning that I think that's an intentional thing that you can't. Yeah, okay. Windows is the guy with the glasses. I wrote a tweet yesterday where I called somebody Niles because I'd got mixed up. There's someone called Noir and there's someone called Childs.
Yeah.
So I'd sort of merged them into one in my own sort of Lovecraftian way.
Very appropriate, very appropriate.
There are lots of moments in which sort of somebody slips off. There's a lot of like, where was so and so when this happened, and where's so and so, and also they do that themselves. Like there are at least two scenes where they catch one of their own people from behind. You know, they attack them from two directions at the same time.
Yeah. It's often also what you don't see in the film. So before you've had any transformations at all, there's a scene so that the men are off in their rooms, or they're not in the rec room. Basically, you've had some scenes in the medical bay, and but they're away from that part of the base. And you can hear music playing in the distance. But then you have this a tracking shot going from medical through to rec room, and it's like a steady cam, almost Shining-esque, slow shot going through the doorway. And it kind of starts out at a kind of head height, human head height, and then sort of kind of goes down to maybe dog head height. And it's just this sense of, what are we actually watching? Are we watching the point of view of something in that space? If we are, it's not seeing any humans. What it's seeing is a kind of an absence. And what you don't see and absence, again, are really interesting features to this film. Empty spaces, absent spaces. And the mind, again, starts to fill these spaces.
Yeah. And I mean, the one exception in terms of the introduction, you mentioned it earlier as well, as Kurt Russell, who, I mean, he was a star sort of with scare quotes around in the sense that he definitely built up a filmography at this point, but he hadn't yet broken into any sort of mainstream. I don't think he ever would, really. I think Kurt Russell has sort of accumulated his star status rather than broken through as such.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, really, and I think that probably suits him quite well. He's perfectly happy. He's still working, isn't he? He's still stuff quite successfully, so he's had a very decent career. Thank you very much, and married to Goldie Hawn, so it's just not bad, is it? So,
no, absolutely. I mean, it's no slight on him. There are plenty of actors who have had far worse careers, and I think he's had a stellar career. But I'm just thinking as well in terms of his recognizability. You know, he's definitely a step up from. Did he do Elvis the TV movie before this?
Did. So that's what, 77, no, 78, right. I think it was, after Elvis. So yeah, again, a degree of familiarity, but not, we're not talking Eastwood.
No, exactly. We're not talking Burt Reynolds.
No, definitely second string, but suitable. And in fact, to be honest, if someone like Eastwood had been approached, he would have insisted on far more screen time, wouldn't he? So it wouldn't have worked. So an ideal casting for ensemble film, I think.
And you get him introduced as sort of the lead character simply by dint of the fact he gets a sort of scene to himself playing computer chess.
Yeah, so that sets him up as our sort of person to follow, and we often see him in subsequent scenes. The camera will approach him. Other characters will move beyond the frame there, and we'll focus in on Macready. But in so doing, we see him looking at the others. So you remember the scene where they bring in the thing that they found at the Norwegian base, and they uncover it in the medical room. The camera will go past all of the other crew members, and there's Macready there, and he's already starting to look at the other guys and thinking, how are they taking this? And then we are, as the viewer, we're thinking, how are we taking it? You know? So he's sort of us in the film.
I noticed a moment in that scene, a detail last night, where the autopsy is going on, and Blair is giving some explanation of it, and he's poking the remains with like the rubber tip of his pencil, and then he puts the pencil in his mouth.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the fan base will tell you, well, that's the point at which Blair was contaminated. That's when it happened. That's when it started. Maybe, who knows, really? But yeah, that is something that has been picked up on, absolutely.
And it could just be the actor doing a bit of business, you know.
Sure.
It's not...
Absolutely, yeah. Well, this is the great thing. I mean, I should say actually, when I did the book, the one thing that scared me the most was how it was going to be received by the fan base, because I was very well aware of just how fanatical the fans of the film are and can be in the best possible sense. And we're talking about guys here, by the way, who years after the film was completed and shot, some of them actually went to Stewart in Alaska where the snowy scenes were shot to look for pieces of the helicopter that was blown up. So someone out there has got a rotor blade in their possession. This is the level of fandom. So I was a bit worried how they would receive it. They've been fantastic hastened to it. They've been absolutely brilliant since the book came out. That rapidly became, I say rapidly, once the internet kicked in and fan culture started up in the late 90s, early 2000s, the pencil tip thing soon became a big talking point. There are many others in the film as well, but that was one of the early ones that cropped up. And people think, I spotted where it all started, but I doubt it very much.
I mean, that's kind of the somebody was responding to a tweet that I made and was saying, it's like a painting. You just enjoy looking at it. You don't have to come up with sort of theories and stuff. Yeah. But I think coming up with theories is kind of part of the fun as well.
Absolutely is. And I have myself over the years. Absolutely. There's one interesting one. One of my favorites is how did the thing get to the blood supply? So, at a certain point in the film, when someone's come up with the idea of doing a blood test, they go to the refrigerator where the blood supply is kept, and someone's had a go at it, and the blood's everywhere. And what do we do now? And he thought, how did the thing, whoever the thing is or was at that point, get the key to get into the refrigerator and ruin the blood? Because it's apparent that Gary, played by Donald Moffat, is the only person with the key, and he occasionally lends it to Dr. Copper. And that casts a bit of doubt on Gary at that point in the film, which is quite interesting. But there's a scene, if you remember the bit where Bennings is assimilated, and Windows comes into the room and sees the slimy, slithery Bennings with a tentacle wrapped around him, and then runs out of the room. At that point, right on the cut, before it goes to the next scene, when Windows runs out, you can hear some keys drop on the floor. Watch it again.
I think I noticed that as well. I think I heard it, but I didn't notice it.
Yeah, if you watch that bit again, it's right on the cut, and it's like, okay, maybe that's the point of it. Not to say that Windows picked it up, but somebody else, because the keys are on the ground, picked the keys up, got to the blood, blah blah blah.
It could also be that the thing is very mechanically astute, and so could easily pick that lock, because I mean, downstairs he's making a flying saucer in the space of like however many hours he's had at his disposition.
Yeah, a smart SOB, as Kurt refers to. Yeah.
The paranoia in this film is sort of off the hook, and that's how you want it, really, isn't it? You want everything to be up there. I think it has to work though on a level of, you can't. I mean, I would argue that something like, say, Inception has a certain type of ambiguity, which is like a little bit of a trick, you know. And I think it looks ambiguous, but it isn't ambiguous. You know, Inception, it's a dream. It has to be a dream at the end. It's signaled by so many things that that's a dream. That just the fact that you don't see the top.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Fall over, and you're being teased with you might, but you haven't, but you might. Yeah. That's a trick. I'm not buying it. Doesn't make the film worse or better or anything, but it's just not ambiguous. Here, I think it has to play with the fact that it's ambiguous, but there has to be a sense that it is knowable, that there is some way out there, and I think that is that's one of its attractions. That you think, if I just watch it enough times and think about it hard enough, there will
absolutely be... right. You're absolutely correct. But each time it will always evade you, which is because it has to. Because that's if you got it, you wouldn't need to see it anymore. And this is one of the most rewatchable films that I can think of. I literally almost get something new from it every time I watch it. However much that was intended by Carpenter and the crew, it's a film that just keeps on giving.
But as you say, it just feels so. What you were talking about earlier, blocking and everything, it feels so carefully made. And
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so thoughtful in that sense. I mean, I think the script is fantastic. I think there's a real the use of humor, the use of the way it sort of undercuts its own sort of horror with a sense of its own absurdity and ridiculousness.
Yeah. There's some interesting backstory stuff as well, just thrown in there, and you think, well, they didn't need to do that. But I think it's after Bennings has been uncovered and they torch him outside. There's a quick scene inside, and there's Gary just sort of almost looking into space, saying, Gary was Bennings was my friend. I've known him for 10 years, and it's, well, they didn't need to say that, but somehow that little drop of character development, post mortem, if you like, was an interesting little touch, I think, and it just lends itself to the fabric of the film, I think.
It humanizes Gary, because otherwise he would just be like the gun-wit hard ass. Instead, now the only guy in the whole film who expresses genuine emotion about there has been consequences that have nothing to do with his own survival. It's purely about, as you say, we never really find out what they're doing out there either.
No. Playing table tennis, largely, it would seem. No, that is.
He's excellent at that point.
That is quite ambiguous in a sense, but I think that was just because it was superfluous to the plot. Really, we don't really need to know what they're researching. I mean, you can find character notes in the preparatory documents for the film that sketch out the role of each of the characters. Yeah, I mean, there's a botanist in there, for instance, and other things. So, but they didn't need to flesh any of that out particularly. What was McCready there to do? Was he a Vietnam vet? Did he fly helicopters during that? What is he doing there? What are any of them doing there? It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and you have got that sense of like there's still that countercultural sort of, late 70s, late 60s. The consequences of those decades are still playing out in the I forget the character's name, but the sort of burned out, sort of hippie, possibly a Vietnam vet himself,
Yeah, there's one to see there, actually. Yeah, it's true. I've always thought of it as a very kind of, fin de siècle part of 70s cinema, really.
Right.
It definitely looks more 70s than 80s to me. It's part, like, you think about the sort of political paranoia movies of that decade, and it feels very much a part of that rather than Reagan America of the 80s. Say, it doesn't have, it's just so much more downbeat, isn't it? So, which probably explains why it didn't do very well commercially when it came out.
Yeah. I'm always interested in as well when they talk about Gary relinquishes control, which again is another interesting beat in his character, because you would the more predictable, the worse version of this film would have had him being a megalomaniac and need to be killed at some point.
Yeah.
But the fact he gives up power, you'd feel a lot better if I did somebody else to control. Child says, "Oh, I'll do it," and MacReady says, "Oh, I'm not having you doing it, you hothead." And there's nothing in the film so far to have justified such a sort of animus on the part of MacReady.
I totally agree. At this point, mention of the handing over the gun, we could fall down a rabbit hole that I explore in the book about polar magnetism and metal objects, and how.
Oh yeah, this is your Butterfingers theory.
Yeah, so how a lot of the characters in the film struggle to keep hold of metallic objects. There is something in this from the point of view of the source material of the John Campbell Jr. novella Who Goes There, because that is also set at the South Pole, and a lot of the characters' names and their descriptions have metallic qualities to them. Some of that in the film, actually, you've got Dr. Copper, for instance. But it's remarkable how frequently, when I came to one of my many re-watches of the film when I was writing the book, it's remarkable how frequent characters are seen to fumble or to drop some metallic or magnetic objects. I mean, just the thermite charge at the beginning when the helicopter blows up, the guy actually, it flies out of his hand. Gary's gun, nobody wants to touch it. Who picks it up? MacReady picks it up, because MacReady is the seemingly reliable character in this who was not going to drop this object. Of course, later on, when he can't get the flamethrower to work, he has a bit of a wobble himself. But quite often, this happens if you rewatch the film. And one of my reasons for writing the book was to get people to rewatch the film, even if they're really familiar with it, to begin to see, oh yeah, there's that bit. I wanted to make connections, and that's one of them that I spotted.
Drop the keys as well.
Drop the keys. There you go.
Fits into it.
They start to rack up. It's amazing.
I also thought about that in terms of, is the dog doing that? Is the dog sort of making people, or the thing? Is it sort of creating a sort of derangement or clumsiness as part of its sort of psychic powers?
Quite possibly. Again, that is in the Campbell Jr. novella. There's definite hint that it has a psychological influence on the humans. So that's entirely likely that there's something going on there.
And Blair is sort of the first affected in terms of his sort of psychological breakdown. One of the things that always makes me laugh, and it's part of the mordant humor of the piece, which again I think is one of its real strengths, is when MacReady goes to visit him and ask him a question. He's sitting in there with a noose.
Yeah.
It's just like nobody mentions it. Nobody says, "Oh, he might hang himself. Let's get him out of there." And he's done it as just a joke.
Well, it's a lovely little touch, and if you think that Blair is already infected at that point, and that actually is Blair is already the thing when he's in his little cell, he's gone. The thing has gone to the lengths of creating a noose to give the impression that Blair, the human, is considering killing himself if the thing kind of comes to get him, even though it's probably already got him. So yeah, the thing is wise. It knows what it's doing.
And it also gives MacReady all the advice, don't you shouldn't be eating. You should, it starts to lay down some rules. But again, if it's a thing, then these rules might just be nonsense. It might just be a distraction, which is a problem I have with my own theory, which I was very happy with last night. But in the cold light of day, I've begun to have doubts about.
This is a common experience. Don't worry about it, John. This is a very common experience with this film. You think, I've got it, and no, it starts to fall apart. I know exactly what you mean. I've been there many, many times. It is very tempting. I know we'll come on to talk about the ending, but it is very tempting to think that Macready is the thing at the end, because that would be a lovely twist, wouldn't it? But if you track back and you think, okay, well, if that is the case, at what point was he assimilated? And if he was assimilated when you think he might have been, and I think probably the period would have been when he was outside of the main base in his shack, and he wasn't on screen for a few minutes, you might think maybe something happened there because we didn't witness the moment. You then have to go on and think, yeah, well, okay, if he was the thing at that point, he went on to kill other things. He torched up a couple of other things. So would a thing kill another thing? Seems unlikely, but maybe the thing would kill another thing if it meant that it's just a part of a whole, and as long as a part of that whole, survives, then it all survives. So maybe that does work. Answers on a postcard.
Just clipping his toenails. Well, we'll definitely come to the ending as you've said. But before we do it, I think there's one big thing we haven't talked about yet, which I'd like to get. For many people, the appeal of this film were the incredible special effects and the body horror. I've already mentioned Lovecraft here. I think this is one of those films. It's like The Matrix being the best film, the best Lovecraft film. Lovecraft.
Absolutely right. I'm just going to give a quick plug, actually, to a new documentary that is being prepared at the moment called The Thing Expanded by a production company called Creative VC. I'm on the advisory circle for this film, and one of the things that they are striving to do, which has hardly ever happened since the film was released, is to get Rob Bottin sat in a chair and interviewed for this new documentary. Right. I don't know whether they've achieved it yet. They may still, who knows? But if they do it, the absolute, it will be the motherlode of scoops, because everybody wants to hear what Rob Bottin now has to say about his work on the film. What happened to him during the making of the film is pretty well documented. He did very, very long hours. He ended up in hospital because he was just exhausted. He put an awful lot of work into this film, and I think he did it at a time for horror and effects when it was the eye of the storm almost. After that, you would begin to see CGI taking over from practical effects. Before they weren't sophisticated enough. So it really it's a moment in time, I think, for effects cinema, and once seen, never forgotten. You can watch them, you can watch the film over and over, and no matter how artificial some of the effects do now appear, there's still something about them that kind of digs into something inside, in scary in the soul almost. Just it affects you then, and there's almost, its relative artificiality lends itself, maybe accidentally, to this fear factor. So yeah, absolutely critical to the film's success and reputation.
I mean, you mentioned at one point that at a certain point, you started watching the effects and thinking, it's not what's happening to a human being. It's actually an alien metamorphosis. And as such, that also works in terms of the quality of the special effects, because you can say it doesn't matter that it doesn't look like a person anymore, because it's not a person.
Yeah. You could think that is how a thing behaves. And it's a weird bit. I think, again, thinking back to my very first viewing of it, when you don't really appreciate all of that potential subtlety, you just think this is a person erupting and exploding everywhere, and that is human blood going everywhere. But then the more you think about the fact that it's just an alien entity, slightly eases this queasiness about the human body falling apart, because it's more like a plant. You see tendrils. And again, this is in the Campbell-Junior novel. It's quite a bit that suggests it's vegetable rather than animal.
Which brings us to John Wyndham and Day of the Triffids.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's part of that background of vegetable horror. Is that a thing? Even in fact, actually, in the Hawks film,
Well, Annihilation, the Alex Garland
yeah,
film.
completely.
Yeah.
But in the Howard Hawks film, the 50s, the version of the thing from another world, somebody refers to it as an intellectual carrot.
Yes.
So it's definitely a strand. And so the more you watch the Carpenter film, the more you can choose to think that actually what you're watching is basically a plant of some description, coming apart at the seams.
I'm also thinking of The Last of Us with its fungi.
I haven't seen that actually, but I will take your word for it.
It has a sort of fungal aspect to the zombies in that.
Yeah,
that's how it's being spread.
Yeah. Well, that matches up with the whole notion of life cycle too, doesn't it? So that works quite well, I think.
So with the effects, as you say, there are various sort of rationales you can use behind it, either to make you feel better or to explain some degree of the special effects. I remember. I think it might have been on a documentary or a commentary track. They were talking about like the first thing you see is all the animals or the creatures it has encountered sort of coming out as, there's a bit of dog in there and there's a bit of insect in there and there's a bit of something that might have met on an alien planet in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually goes back to what I was saying earlier about the soundtrack, about the sound effects. When you hear it emerging, you can hear various death screams going on in there from who knows what in its past. So it's carried forward all of these traits and traces from whatever previously it has assimilated, and you can see and hear it, I think.
And being everything, it is no thing as well. You never get to a thing which you say this is the thing. This is the thing at its core. And I don't want to play the what ifs too much, but in again another worst possible film version of this, you would have the moment where it sort of reveals itself and says to the people, you puny humans, you have not, and it just doesn't do that. You never get to know, which means that it's much more important whether Childs or Macready are a thing rather than what the revelation of identity is in the thing itself.
What you're describing there, to an extent, is the prequel, the 2011 prequel, where you do supposedly see an origin form, an original form of the thing, which actually is, I don't think is too bad, and to some extent does emulate, some of the descriptions in the Campbell-Junior novella. But from the point of view of a movie, you really don't need it, and the Carpenter film did not do it, and it's all the better for not doing it, really. That was probably a bad idea for the prequel.
I've never seen the prequel. Should I see it then? Is it a recommendation?
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to sort of damn it with faint praise at this point. It's definitely worth to see, and it's quite nice. They pay homage to the Carpenter film in many ways. One of which is at the very end of the prequel film. You get shots of characters getting into the helicopter and chasing after a dog across the snow. So you can do a kind of a matchup if you really wanted to. You could watch the prequel and it would actually go straight into the 82 movie. There are other features. For instance, it picks up on the fact that the thing organism clearly cannot assimilate metal objects. So they find a character's fillings in the shower that have fallen out when that character was assimilated. Stuff like that, which are interesting little sort of side notes, but it's never going to be up there with the original, with the 82 film. Also being made in 2011, and despite the fact that they actually made a lot of practical on-set effects for the making of the film, the producers chose to use a lot of CGI instead, and it's never going to be as good.
Yeah, I think CGI is so funny that it's so dated. It's dated much more quickly than, and I think there are so many films beyond the fantastic genre that have used CGI as a sort of cost-cutting thing of like, for instance, views outside of windows and outside of cars as they're driving along, which will date as badly as the sort of back projections you see in 1940s films.
One of the phenomena that I think has happened as part of the reappreciation of the thing is that I think audiences have grown weary of CGI, and they've gone looking for earlier examples of practical effects. And I think that has naturally now almost come full circle, where you see more and more films that actually do use practical effects. I mean, I'm thinking of Alien Romulus, for instance, quite a lot of that. So I think, if for no other reason, the thing, it forms a really important part in the history of effects and where we are now with it, and how audiences respond to effects. And I'm really pleased about that, because I'm no great lover of CGI. I rapidly grew bored of it. So I'm always happy to see good examples of practical effects.
Yeah, absolutely. To hear from myself as well. Let's move on to the ending then. I'll give you my theory, and you can shoot it down.
No,
okay. It's already been shot down on Threads and Twitter. So basically, I was thinking, okay, no, I get it. That lasts. My idea is that he hasn't been assimilated till that final explosion, because they talk about explosions and things of how bits of the blood can rush out. So you've got smithereens of thing flying in all directions, and he's in close proximity. And because of the edit, and here there is a feeling that time has passed. It's not simply, immediately after the explosion. The fires are still raging, but it's not right after the explosion. It's down to child. At this point, they have a conversation about what to and he says, oh, I guess we'll just have to align, which of course he's already said that if they do that, if the thing will be happy, the thing will be happy. So if he is human and Childs is, then he shouldn't be happy unless he's Child. And then he's drinking his whiskey and he's handing it to Child. And Child, this goes back to what Blair said of you prepare your own food, because you could even just a particle of stuff could assimilate you. Now, I've since been told that isn't whiskey, that he's testing Childs, but I don't know. I don't think MacReady's ever without. I think he's.
Well, it's one of the first things that you see when he's playing computer chess. He switches on them. He just brought into a glass, but he's got his bottle of J&B always. Yeah, absolutely.
And I just got a feeling he's got, like, they all have an allowance of like 7 crates of something, and he's got his crates of J&B.
Yeah,
everything's going. And then that scene plays out of like, if you think of it like that and you watch that scene, there's a real sense of smiling. It's like, I've kind of got you.
Yeah, I mean, you can have that interpretation. It's free to have, and that's the great thing about the movie, that we can all have our own ideas on this. It's something that I touch on in the conclusion in the book, and I think I throw in a variety of different potential scenarios. My personal favorite is that they're both just human, because I think that would be the most bleak ending. They are both still human, and they're just going to freeze to death, and that is how it ends. And maybe scraps of thing tissue are going into deep freeze and maybe will be discovered, and it's maybe has the intelligence to know that a rescue team will turn up, and that will be its opportunity to skip and go elsewhere, maybe. But I don't think anybody really knows what is going on, and that is the perennial charm of this, that it can be reinterpreted over and over and over again.
Yeah, no, I could go with that. I could definitely go with that. I mean, it's such an interestingly bleak film in the sense that I think that moment where Kurt Russell just says, none of us are getting out of this alive. This isn't a case of surviving something. That's such a moment where it becomes sort of transcendental as a thriller. It does,
and that's actually why I like my own interpretation, that they're both human, they're both going to die, because surely someone's going to survive. Well, why? Well, maybe they're not. Maybe that is what makes this film above others of its type, that it's just going to explore the potential for a complete end here, and that's it. For another 100,000 years, at which point some other life form will come along and maybe find the thing. Yeah. Just who knows?
Oh, you've convinced me now. See, I'm such a sucker. I'm...
No. But it invites you to interpret, doesn't it? The film, it wants you to come up with a theory. I always think, and it will continue to be debated back and forth and nobody will come up with a definitive. And even Carpenter reviews it. Well, he's done interviews where he says, I can tell you how the film is resolved and what is actually happening. All you have to do is send me a check through the post. So yeah, no, it's going to do that. So it will always be open to discussion.
How much is the sum?
Oh, 50,000. I don't know. I can't remember how much he said. He may not even have got far as actually naming the figure, but it's just the fact that as long as you pay me, I will tell you.
I swear to God, if we do a GoFundMe, I bet we'd be able to raise it. We're going to pay John Carpenter the amount of money, and
yeah, he still wouldn't tell. He still wouldn't tell you. I don't think.
Yeah. Or you would. Why trust him? He didn't tell you in the film. Why trust him when he tells you? You know,
he just makes something up on the spot.
I bet he's the thing.
But you know what? I think you might be onto something there. Put that into the Post 31 website chat board, and somebody will come counter it, or actually defend it alongside you and say, "Yeah, you're right there."
Got a point.
That's it.
Oh wow, it's such a great film, and it deserves this kind of revisiting and rethinking and analysis that you've done in the book. And I'd really urge anybody who has the opportunity to go back and read that, and also to read the new book that's coming out, which you mentioned earlier, called?
Well, it's Scarred for Life, Volume 3. It's Excellent. A whopping 740-page book, of which I have about 7 pages, about an essay about the thing. And the essay sort of charts my adolescent relationship to the film and how prior to seeing it, that when I was sort of junior school age, I used to go to my local joke shop and I used to collect all these little rubber fingers and thumbs and hands and things. I was like a junior school Jeffrey Dahmer. I had this whole collection of like rubber body parts. Weird. So when you start to see a film that shows bits of human bodies kind of falling apart, I was all over it. I was like, this is great. This was made for me.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
So good. And finally, the final question I'd like to ask you, Jez, is for a film book recommendation, because it's something I've fallen out of the habit of doing recently, what with festivals and everything. But a film book that you'd like to recommend, it doesn't have to be like the best film book you've ever read or anything like that, but just something that our readers might be might want to pick up.
I'm just trying to think of the name of the author of the book I have in mind. It's Peter Conrad, and the book is The Hitchcock Murders. I came across a copy of this book in a charity shop in Edinburgh many years ago, and I'd never heard of it before. Peter Conrad is not exclusively a film writer. He's written on opera and all sorts of other different things. He did write a book about Orson Welles, but he did The Hitchcock Murders. And it's a highly personalising. I think it starts out with him talking about when he snuck in to see Psycho when it came out. And what I liked about that book, and I read it before I wrote my book on the thing, is that he dips in through the chapters. He dips into notions and themes and ideas that keep cropping up within Hitchcock's films. So it's not a biography. It's not a career from A to Z kind of interpretation. It's just conjuring with ideas that Hitchcock himself often played around with. And I just really liked the way it was written. I remember after I'd read the book and thoroughly enjoyed it, I took a look at some reviews of the book on Amazon, and people were really annoyed. It's getting quite a few kind of 2-3 star reviews on Amazon, and people saying, well, I didn't really like this book because it kind of relies on you having seen the films before you read the book. And I was, well, why would you read the book about films you haven't even seen yet? I always find that a bit of an odd criticism of film monographs. Surely the reason why you got the book in the first place is because you've seen the film or the films and you want to learn a little bit more about them by reading them. So I always find it to be a peculiar criticism of a film book. So that would be a book that I think I'd recommend. Peter Conrad's The Hitchcock Murders.
Yeah, I mean, I always do this thing when I'm reading a biography of a filmmaker or anything, is if it does get to a point where it's a film that I haven't seen, one of the more obscure ones, I'll read the making of bit, but when it comes to, say, the writer doing an analysis or something, I'll just skip those pages and think, I'll come back to them when I've seen the film. Because usually reading one of those books gives me a watch list to watch anyway, and I'm not going to stop reading and go and watch them, so I'll get round to them and then I'll go back to the... So it's... it can be an interplay, but it's certainly not a criticism of a writer to, I found that writing the Terrence Malick book is, if you just have to assume at a certain point. You guys have watched Badlands, right? You guys have watched The Thin Red Line. I don't have to do too much explanation.
Well, there's still some skill in writing some précis about what happens as part of your own writing. But it's you're not telling the reader the story of the entire film because they haven't seen it. I kind of play around with that a little bit. I can't remember which one it was. I think it actually might have been the Scarred for Life essay that I say, we will now have a 2-minute silence for anybody who hasn't already seen this film. And then you have got time to go away, watch the film, and then come back and we'll start it. You can rejoin us at this point, and then we'll carry on. A bit patronising, but you know what I mean. It's just if you're interested in what I've got to say about this film, I'm kind of figuring you've seen the film already yourself, and you've got your own ideas, and you can play those off against my ideas and agree with me, disagree with me, whatever you like. Really, that's not. It's just chewing the fat, isn't it?
Isn't it just? That's what film books are about. It's about extending the conversation. It's
absolutely
the best film book is like sitting after having a drink after the cinema with your, and being with an erudite friend who knows more than you do, and is filling you in on what you should have got.
and then listening to them and saying, yeah, that's bollocks, that is.
As well. Listen, Jez, it's been lovely talking to you. It's been great to have an excuse to go back and finish and revisit this film that is already up there. What a wonderful year this 1982 was for cinema. Blade Runner and The Thing the same week. And not to mention E.T.
We won't mention E.T. No. I hate that film.
There you go. And on that bombshell, thank you so much, Jez.
No problem.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost. Their designer quality frames start at $95, including prescription lenses, plus scratch-resistant, smudge-resistant, and anti-reflective coatings, and UV protection, and free adjustments for life. To find your next pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to find the Warby Parker store nearest you, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.